The movie is set in Iwo Jima. It begins with a team of archaeologists discovering an item in the tunnels in the year 2005. The setting returns to Iwo Jima back in 1944, where we're introduced to Private First Class Saigo and his fellow soldiers who are busy digging trenches at a beach and look very exhausted. At that moment, Lieutenant General Tadamashi is seen arriving at the garrison. He is greeted warmly by Admiral Oshigi and the forces he is meant to take over. Tadamashi and his associate, Lieutenant Fujita, insist on visiting the island. The admiral and his soldiers are happy to comply and provide the pair with a general orientation of the land. There they observe Private First Class Saigo and Comrade Kashiwara being brutally beaten by Captain Tanida for making unpatriotic statements. General Tadamashi stops the brutality, quoting that a good captain uses his brain, not just his whip, and he rescues the pair that were being punished. The general then orders the troops to begin excavating the subterranean fortifications into Mount Suribachi, but observing that the soldiers were fatigued and in agony, he instructs them to take a rest, during which the troops, including Private Saigo, admire the leadership skills of the general. In the evening, General Tadamashi and his officers gather to discuss the state of the island's fortifications and their current state. He decides that the fortifications at Suribachi are a priority, and the next morning, the soldiers receive a lesson in shooting, and Private Saigo underperforms and is ordered to clean the boots of the entire troop as punishment. The troops, accompanied by General Tadamashi, head into town where he is reminded of his relationship with his son by the sight of a young boy playing in front of war tanks. He orders the evacuation of the civilians from the town. The scene then cuts to General Tadamashi welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Barron. Barron is a well-known Olympic gold medalist show jumper, and the two men engage in banter before Tadamashi invites him to dinner. At dinner, while they express their doubts about the island's ability to withstand an attack, they also acknowledge the hope and they proceed to discuss the defense strategies for the island. The next day, General Tadamashi and Lieutenant Fujita inspect the coastline and outline the defense strategies for the island in the event of an American invasion of Mount Suribachi. Despite some officers, including Colonel Barron, disagreeing with Tadamashi's plans, he assures them that if the Americans do seize the beaches, the mountain fortifications he was having built in Motoyama, Agashima, and Suribachiyama would have a better chance of survival. Meanwhile, Japanese troops are sent to Mount Suribachi in preparation for the upcoming war. The harsh conditions like poor nutrition and prevalence of unsanitary water takes its toll on the soldiers. The point was emphasized when we discover later in the movie that Kashiwara had died as a result of dysentery. In the caves that the soldiers were digging, Private Shimizu takes over for Kashiwara, but Saigo suspects Shimizu is a spy from the Kamatai and has been ordered to gather information on disloyal troops. The next day, still suspicious of Shimizu, Saigo reflects on his life back home as a baker with his wife, and thinks about how hard life must be for her without him, specifically recalling the conversation they had when he was chosen to serve his country and potentially die for it. And back on Mount Suribachi, the soldiers are tirelessly digging trenches for the imminent war. Admiral Oshigi confronts General Tadamashi about his intentions and makes it clear that he opposes going to war with the Americans if they invade the island. During a lesson in tactics taught by General Tanida, the captain informs the troops that the target of the enemy should be the medic, as many American soldiers would put their lives on the line to protect them. Meanwhile, Colonel Barron approaches General Tadamashi, who was making plans for the battle, and Barron informs the general that he should keep a close eye on Major General Hayashi, whom he believes is jeopardizing the safety of the soldiers. Soon after, American battle planes soon start arriving and begin to bomb the beaches of Suribachi, which results in a high number of civilian casualties. This indicates that the US has launched an assault against Iwo Jima. With the knowledge that the US ships have surrounded the island of Seppan, General Tadamashi addresses the troops to prepare for the worst-case scenario and to be extra vigilant. A few days into the battle, Private Saigo and the remaining soldiers are seeking refuge in the caves to avoid the dysentery that has spread throughout the sewers. As Private Saigo is assigned to dispose of waste, he notices the flotilla of US ships that threaten the invasion of Japan. Soon after, the American soldiers soon arrive on Japanese soil, and the soldiers of Iwo Jima engage in combat. But their lack of weapons and skilled soldiers makes it difficult to fight, and the beach fortifications are eventually breached as anticipated by General Tadamashi. Meanwhile, during the intense battle, the need for a machine gun and extra ammunition forces the soldiers to retreat into the caves. Then, Private Saigo was sent to General Tadamashi's quarters, where he overhears orders being given to retire to the Saibachi camp and request for extra machine guns from his commander to the Saibachi garrison. Contrary to the general's orders, the commander refuses their request and instead orders his soldiers to take their own lives. Private Saigo convinces Shimizu to flee with him instead of following the suicidal order, and they witness the brutal death of their two comrades. As they try to escape, they are attacked by US Marines, leaving only Saigo and Shimizu alive. Upon reaching their lines, Saigo and Shimizu are accused by Lieutenant Ito of being traitors as they should have died at their posts. As he raises his sword to strike them down, General Tadamashi saves Saigo and Shimizu by conforming the order to withdrawal. As the fall of Suribachi looms, the Japanese launch an attack on the US Marines, only to suffer heavy losses. During the chaos, Colonel Barron has a heated argument against Lieutenant Ito over his disobedience of orders from General Tadamashi, and for endangering the lives of their soldiers. Eventually, the survivors of the attack agree to regroup with Colonel Barron, while Ito sets off towards the US lines with 3 mines and a plan to bury himself beneath their tanks. The following day, Colonel Barron's men come across a wounded Marine by the name of Sam. Barron orders his men to treat the wounded soldier and get back to camp. That night, Barron starts building rapport with Sam in an attempt to question him. After the conversation, Sam succumbs to his wounds and dies. Back in a cave, Shimizu discloses that he wasn't a spy. Instead, he was discharged from the Kemitai for insubordination for resisting to kill an innocent pet dog. The next morning, Barron's troops are attacked once more and Barron is blinded by flying derbies from a bombing. Despite his injuries, he orders his men to proceed without him and asks for a rifle from Lieutenant Okubo and stays behind in a cave. Not long after, the soldiers hear a gunshot from the cave, and they later discover that Barron has taken his own life in the name of honor. Meanwhile, General Tadamashi receives more devastating news that more of his soldiers have been killed and the remaining plan to flee. Shimizu is the first to escape and surrender to the Americans, but he is later shot and killed. And Lieutenant Ito also surrenders, but he and Okubo are eventually shot and killed by US Marines. Despite their losses, the Japanese continue to resist and fight against the Americans. Saigo discovers the bodies of dead soldiers at their posts and continues towards General Tadamashi, only to find more dead bodies, including his own friend. Among the survivors of Mount Suribachi is now only Saigo, the sole survivor. Preparations are underway for a final attack, but a phone call interrupts a conversation between Saigo and General Tadamashi. The general begins to listen to a song dedicated to the gallant men of Iwo Jima, and after taking a moment to gather his emotions, he instructs Saigo to burn all the papers, including the letters he had written. That night, General Tadamashi launches a final surprise attack against the city with all of the soldiers that he could find. But tragedy strikes when he's gravely wounded, and his devoted aide Fujita takes him out the following morning. Despite his grave condition, General Tadamashi orders Fujita to behead him. But as the loyal soldier was about to execute the order, he was shot down by a US Marine sniper. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Saigo discovers the wounded general and informs him that he had actually burned some papers that he had been ordered instead of burning all of them. And with a heavy heart, the general orders Saigo to bury him in an undisclosed location, and grasping his American M1911 handgun given to him as a present from the United States before the war, he takes his own life. As tears stream down his face, Saigo is left to bury the general in the dirt of Japan. Meanwhile, back on the hill, US Marines discover Fujita's body and begin searching the location for any remaining Japanese soldiers. They find Tadamashi's handgun, and one of the Marines tucks it under his belt. When Saigo comes face to face with the Marines and sees the gun under the Marine's belt, he is triggered by his experiences and launches a shovel attack, leading him to be beaten unconscious by the Marines. The Marines take Saigo back to the prisoners of war because he was too weak to fight and he is wheeled away on a stretcher. He notices the setting sun and grins glumly. The movie ends back at the beginning in 2005, with archaeologists completing their excavation and discovering the bag of letters that Private First Class Saigo had hidden. As they open the bag of letters, the voice of Japanese soldiers who wrote them can be heard echoing in the background. The letters pour forth and the memory of their bravery is kept alive. And that is how our movie ends. I hope you guys liked our recap. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel. I will see you guys on the next recap. Bye.